Okay, before we start the meeting, are we happy to reconfirm Lyndon Jones as the chair for this next municipal year?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Lovely, that's great, thank you. I'll hand over to you then, Lyndon.
Great, thank you, and thank everyone for their confidence. I'm very, very grateful, and hope we can continue to work together and get some good work done this year too. So thank you. Are there any apologies for absence?
We have no apologies for absence today.
Okay, great. Thank you. And before I go any further, could I welcome Robert Smith, Councillor Robert Smith, who is the new cabinet member for education, and welcome him. I worked with Robert for a few years on the education policy development committee, and it's been a great pleasure. So congratulations, Robert, on joining the cabinet, and we look forward to working with you again.
Well, thank you, and I know I look forward to working with the committee as well moving forward. I'll do my best, and it's a great opportunity and a great honour. So and as I said, happy to work with the Scrutiny committee as well.
Great, thank you very much. Right, are there any prohibition of whip votes and declaration of party whips? Nope. Going through very fast here. The next item on the agenda is letters and minutes. They've been circulated. Are the minutes a true record? Could I get a proposer? It's Al, second.
Happy to propose.
Cyril. Yeah. And Cyril there was in for seconding. That's great. Thank you very much. Any comments about the letters? Good. Thank you very much. Public questions. Michelle tells me there are none. No public questions. So we move very quickly on to the next item, which is an item that we picked up in the on the media, and it was being discussed in the Senedd, and that was obviously harassment in schools. I asked if the cabinet member would like to say a few words about that, but what I would like to say is that on this subject, this sort of behaviour, I think all of us do not condone it wherever it's taking place. We read it was an issue in some 90 schools in Wales, and if there are cases, then we need a strategy to deal with it. But we also need to take the right approach to that, and we can't sort of just go in gung-ho. We need a balanced approach and the right approach. And what I would suggest, I don't know what Robert's going to say about that today, but that for this committee to look at, I asked the education department to see what is going on and develop a strategy to deal with it, and then we look at this in September when hopefully they will have they will be able to say a little bit more about that. Robert, could I come over to you first?
Yeah, thank you, Jen. I mean, I share your concerns about the issues that have been raised, and the crucial importance that we take appropriate action and respond as an authority to what has come to light. I think two of the actions that have been taken is that I asked the officers to look at the specific issues raised on the website about the schools in Swansea, 5 schools, and there were a couple there that were named as Swansea schools, which were outside the authority but had a Swansea postal address. So, but we've concentrated on our own schools to make, and with a view to going back to those schools and asking them what were they aware had happened, what actions had been taken, and what their policies were. So that work has been undertaken, and we were reassured in some ways that all incidents of which the schools were aware had been dealt with. Now, what we don't know, of course, is what the details of behind any of the examples cited on the website were. But certainly from schools were confident that they had followed their own procedures, and that where appropriate, although we're not aware of anything in this instance, issues would have been escalated to ourselves as a local authority where it was appropriate to do so, and in accordance with procedures. What I think is equally important is that we don't single out these 5 schools, but that we take this seriously in all schools in Swansea. We don't want this kind of behaviour to take place in any schools. It's not acceptable. Now, there are pastoral systems in each of our schools. There is the new curriculum. Relationships education is a crucial part of every learner's experience. And we will be ensuring that those are used to ensure that these messages are conveyed and reinforced continually, and that our learners know where to turn to if they have any issues, whether they want to report things in school or out of school, that they are enabled and confident to do so. So I think there has to be a twin approach to this, addressing the named schools, but also I think it's a much wider issue that all our schools are on board on this. There's no doubt about that. This is totally unacceptable in every school from every practitioner that I've spoken to, and I'm confident that that's the view in Swansea, and we need to take this seriously. And as I said, make sure our children and young people know where to turn for support.
Great, thank you.
I think Councillor Gebhard, she has some of these issues touch on her portfolio, so she may want to supplement what I've said, Chair, if you're happy with that.
Yeah, good. Certainly. Councillor Gebhard, Louise got in touch and asked could she join the meeting, and I said absolutely delighted if she could. Louise.
Yeah, thank you very much for allowing me to attend, and completely echo what Councillor Smith has just said. I've got Voucher SV, violence against women, domestic abuse and sexual violence as part of my portfolio, and I'm also council member champion for women. So obviously this is an issue very close to my heart. So and indeed, sadly, it's not just a problem in our schools. It's indicative of a problem in wider society, and which is why we've got we are working to address that. I think, unfortunately, gender-based violence is perhaps we have seen more reports of that recently online on our streets, and obviously this recent reports have shown in our schools. And one of the ways to stop that in wider society is, of course, to work with our young people in our schools and make sure that they are safe spaces for young women and girls and young women, but that we're also empowering our boys, our young men, to challenge and reject these sorts of behaviours, and to sort of make sure they're not copying other behaviours from outside of school or whatever. So we have we're due to soon refresh our Voucher SV strategy in the next couple of years. I know colleagues from education come to our leadership group and are going to be reporting on the whole school approach to violence against women, domestic abuse and sexual violence at our leadership group next week with council and third sector colleagues. So yes, just to completely echo what Councillor Smith said, it's we're taking it very, very seriously as part of our general duty to promote equality in Swansea.
Great, thank you, Louise. Any comments from anybody? Yeah, we got a few hands up. First one is Councillor Cyril Anderson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I totally agree with Rob Smith. As you know, Chair, you've read my email. This sort of behaviour sickens me to the core. But because we haven't got all the information together, and it's not just in Swansea, this is nationwide, I would like this subject or agenda item postponed until the cabinet member and Helen Mary Ellen Jones comes back to us with the full problem for us then to discuss it. I would like it just to be taken off the agenda, if you don't mind.
Right, thanks, Cyril. Al Roberts, Al.
Thanks very much, Chair. Yeah, just a comment, really, an observation. And it's always difficult when you're being led by the media in these kind of items, because it just turns into a frenzy, doesn't it? But, you know, to try and stay level-headed. One of the points made in the media is perhaps that there's underreporting of this within schools. And this should not be a witch hunt. This is not recriminating in any way. But it would be very good to pick up, as Cyril suggested, as a formal item when cabinet members and all officers are able to collate any evidence and the contextual information on what this actually looks like on the ground. Because if it is not, to kind of phrase, brushed under the carpet, you know, what does it really look like on the ground? And that sends a message that we as a community take this seriously, but also it sends a message by us asking that question within the school to their own school communities, that this is something that warrants further attention. It is something serious. So just on that point, I just wanted to make a comment. Thank you, Chair.
Great, thank you, Al. Councillor, next we've got Councillor Miles Langston.
Thank you, and thanks, Robert and Louise, for coming along and giving him this information. And it's really encouraging to see that it's been given this sort of serious approach, because it needs that, really. So I think in terms of the way sort of we're looking at it, it'd be interesting to see if you can come back to us with some information on how this is looking in Swansea compared to other areas. Again, as I was saying, how it is looking on the ground, and perhaps also what approaches have been taken elsewhere, which have been proven to be successful in tackling the issue. It'd be interesting to know what has worked, what hasn't worked, so that when we are taking an approach across all schools, because as you say, this does need to be something that's rolled out across all schools, regardless of where the instances have taken place. Interesting to know what has worked, and then perhaps then at a later stage, further feedback on how that's played out.
Okay, thanks, Miles. Councillor Steve Gallagher.
Yes, hi, thank you for that. It's pleasing to hear, I know both Louise and Robert, the view that you've got. I have been in the unfortunate position to see these issues firsthand in a previous career, and I do know how it affects people, what we've got to look at as well, how it affects those who are made complaints against and they're not true complaints. And there's a balance to be had. There's a couple of issues I'd like to raise. And I know, Louise, you've mentioned everything in relation to violence against women and the female agenda, but we've got to be very careful that we don't alienate perhaps those young lads or young men who are also in the position to have violence against them. And I know that's certainly not your intention, but in the school atmosphere, there are youngsters there who are probably under as much violence and threats as what young girls are. And I just want to make sure that we don't put them in fear of not reporting things, which I don't think it would happen. And secondly, it would be interesting to know the thoughts of the head teachers and what support that they would want, because I read the written statement from Jeremy Miles, and I think this is where we must tie in the inquiries and whatever you intend doing and all the evidence to be gathered. Is he's instructed Eston to carry out a review into culture and processes in schools, and to see that we don't duplicate, or that we report back and start to do something the same time as they do, you know, and the timeliness. And perhaps you, Robert, perhaps you'll be in a position as, you know, cabinet member for education to challenge Eston and say, what are you actually doing? You know, how will this tie up with what our thoughts are? And then the questions that we would ask. And that's all I would want to say at this stage.
Great, thank you, Steve. And we've got Councillor Mike Day.
Thank you, Lyndon. Yes, just thank you to Robert and to Louise for their input. And as Louise indicated, unfortunately, this is not just an issue which affects schools and the education department. It's a wider issue, but I do feel that education does have a role to play, particularly in ensuring that the message gets out there quite strongly, and that we are able to encourage those who might be tempted to engage in this sort of behaviour, that this is totally abhorrent as far as we're concerned. And so I think we need to be looking at picking up the points that others have made, but also thinking about, so how do we address that as an education department? How do we ensure that schools are able then to promote these positive messages? The other issue, which I think is important to do, is Steve mentioned the word culture, and I think we need to be providing a culture within our schools where people are able to report this without fear or favour, that they're able to feel comfortable in raising the issues. And I think that is a concern from my perspective, is that there may be instances of this happening where the individuals who are affected might not feel comfortable in raising this sort of issue. So that's another issue that I'd like to kind of ask for further information on, is how do we create that kind of culture? What are the mechanisms for raising these things? But I think everybody would agree that dealing with issues when they are identified is important, but what's of more importance is prevention and early intervention, if we can at least do something to address those particular points. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Mike. Could I, Helen Morgan-Rees, and after that, Steve and Al, you've got your hands up. Is that for a new question, or is it just historical? Right, Helen, here we go. Well, and welcome to the meeting as well.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm really sorry I was late joining today's meeting, so I do run the risk of repeating some ground here that has been covered by Lisa, our safeguarding officer, and potentially Councillor Smith already. So do forgive me if it's a repetition. But the strong message I would want to give as Director of Education is that we have a lot of faith and confidence in our schools in terms of the existing policies, and the policies around positive behaviour, anti-bullying, the policies around curriculum in respect of the current statutory curriculum and personal social education is absolutely key here in creating the right conditions, really, for a safe learning environment, and for children to feel, and young people to feel safe in going to their trusted adults in the school to actually ask or to disclose, to ask for help and disclose information in terms of what's happened to them, either at home, either in school or within their communities. So obviously we take everything that's happened very, very seriously in Swansea, and we just need to enforce really the existing good work that's doing in schools, that's happening in schools, and we also need to work with the inspectorate to understand what their remit will be specifically, what they will look at, and how we can strengthen our approaches on the back of any recommendations across Wales, not just in Swansea. So I'm hoping really that gives assurance to this panel that we have an existing strong culture of endorsing respectful relationships within our schools. This is part and parcel of what our school leaders do, and we just need to strengthen that message, and obviously to support some of our schools as well, because they may have faced some interesting questions from parents, potentially from the press as well, about this website, and it's very difficult for our schools because they haven't always had knowledge of these specific cases in relation to the website. And it is about encouraging our schools just to ask their learners, really, if there's anything that prevents them talking to trusted adults in the school, and to give them the confidence, really, that there are people within our schools that will listen and will treat any disclosure with utter kind of professionalism. So I'll stop there, but I don't know if I've covered all old ground. Really apologise if I have.
Thank you very much, Helen. In fact, Lisa hadn't come in because, in fact, Councillor Smith and Councillor Gibbard had sort of commented on it. Could I say to wind this session up is that obviously with this sort of behaviour we don't condone, you know, wherever it is taking place. And if there are cases, obviously, as you rightly said, we've got a robust strategy to deal with it. I think we need, as we said earlier, we need to take the right approach with dealing with it. And I think listening to Councillor Smith, that is very much what is going to happen, and a balanced approach as well to it. And one thing I feel is that in whatever is happening elsewhere, we can do much better in Swansea and make it better for children and pupils across Swansea. The only thing I would say is that we need to also bear in mind that some teachers may need the right support and training to deal with this because they haven't dealt with it in the past, and I hope you'll consider that. And as a committee, we've decided that we won't. It was obviously good to put it onto the agenda. We've talked about it and we will return to it when at the appropriate time. When you've obviously been doing a lot of work with the department and with the schools, but we will return to it hopefully in the autumn at the appropriate time to see the progress that's been made. Great, thank you all very much. There aren't any other comments. Oh, there are a few hands up. Here we go. Councillor Robert Smith. And
I think if you permit Lisa and Helen to come back first, then I'll come back at the end.
Absolutely.
To respond to some of the points.
Lisa, would you like to come in next?
Yes, thank you. And I recognise that this is a piece of work that's going to be ongoing, and that we more than happy to report back at a later stage as well. But I think just to add to the reassurances that have already been provided this afternoon, I have spoken directly to the schools that were listed, and I think it's a testament to the work that they do in the schools to accept that whereas they didn't really know about the information that was posted on the website and how it correlated with their pupils, they accepted it as an opportunity to reflect and work harder and try and sort of build on the policies and processes they've already got in place to see if they can improve any sort of concerns that there might be. So I think that the positives are that they're not seeing it as a negative. They're seeing it as a further opportunity to build on the work that they already do.
Great. Helen.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring Lisa to the meeting today as our safeguarding officer in education because of the context of this particular website in terms of the reporting across Wales of 91 cases where everyone's invited had captured schools across Wales. And just to provide you with some assurance really that those cases on the website would not have all been known to our schools, and further to that, we wouldn't have known the timescales involved. So these could have been historical. Also, we don't know if they happened in homes, if they happened in other communities historically, if they happened in Swansea schools. So there's a lot about the Everyone's Invited website that makes it very difficult for us to marry up the information there with actual specific cases in our schools. And further to that, it's really difficult for our head teachers to kind of understand what exactly is involved here, because they're just numbers, and the website actually prescribes that you have to give the name of the school. So if you're inputting into Everyone's Invited, you have to actually name your school, but it doesn't correlate to any reporting that's gone on in a school. So the schools could be totally unsighted, unaware of what's going on. So that makes it difficult. So some of the context around this website has not been fully explained in the press and fully understood by everybody. So that's made it quite a difficult position for our schools who are answerable to parents within their communities who have raised a number of questions. So Lisa has been in touch with our schools to make sure that they are supported in answering any queries as well, because that's really important. They feel that the local authority is supporting them with their existing practices. But obviously everybody is open to learning. We are very much a learning organisation within the Education Directorate, and our schools are open to learning, as Lisa has said as well. So anything that we can improve as a result of this is something we would keenly explore.
Great, thank you very much, Helen, for those reassurances. Louise?
I think Robert wants to come in before me. Sorry, Chair.
All right.
Well, yeah, just to respond to some of the points that have been making. Certainly, you know, the Estin is looking at this, and we will be working with Estin and making sure that we supplement and don't duplicate anything they are doing, and certainly looking at good practice, what the evidence base is, and what other areas, what other countries even are doing to combat these kinds of issues, and recognizing that this is a huge social problem and not something that's confined to our schools. And I think that, you know, if we adopt that approach, I think we'll be more effective in starting to address these issues, Chair.
Great, thank you very much, Robert. Louise? Thank
you. I just wanted to sort of specifically just come back on a couple of points that Councillor Gallagher made, and you know, he's completely right that obviously you want to make sure that no false allegations or anything like that take place, and obviously that's what why we need these robust systems of reporting, and that everything is done to properly by policies. And again, of course, we want to make sure that we don't alienate boys and young men, as you point out. But and of course, young men experience you know, domestic violence and other kinds of abuse to a great degree. But I think the thing with this issue is it's a slightly different type of violence. It's quite a long scale. It's not necessarily physical violence. We're talking about sexual harassment, and boys and young men aren't perhaps objectified and sexualized in the same way as young girls are. They don't perhaps experience the same sort of catcalling and comments about their physical appearance and things like that. And I think this culture, as has been talked about, if it does exist, is just as damaging to boys and young men who don't want to be part of that kind of culture as well. It's very bad for their self-esteem and their mental health as well. So it is very important. It is about a cultural issue. It is about a whole scale of behaviours across our society, which is very damaging to both young men and young women. So just wanted to sort of make those points, really. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Louise. Cyril?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, for letting me come in. And thank you to all the members. What you were coming across with, I'm quite happy with. But I'd just like to make a point on what Ellen Morgan-Rees just stated. Some of these allegations on these websites, these kids have had to use the name of their school, and it might not be happening. And that's why, Chair, I did ask for this item to be taken off the agenda, just in case the wrong signals were coming through to us. But thank you very much anyway.
Great, thank you. Right, thank you, Cyril. The next item on the agenda then is COVID recovery and key issues affecting education moving forward. And Robert and Helen, really, it's over to you. I don't know which order you want to go in.
I think, Helen, you're going to lead on this?
Yes, happy to start. So in terms of our recovery in education, obviously at a strategic and operational level, we recognise and acknowledge that education is still in a state of early recovery. So we are still seeing numbers of pupils isolating in our schools. So we're not saying that we are out of the woods in terms of our operational caution with schools. So what that means is that we have control measures that have been in place for a year in our schools in terms of risk assessment and keeping things really tight in terms of minimising the risk of COVID. And of course, the contrast to that is that in society we have a relaxation of restrictions, but the same is not true in our schools. So it's a question for our schools towards the end of term now to sit tight, to keep the status quo, and to preserve those control measures as much as possible. And as much as parents would like to see a normal sports day happening, for example, it's not always practically possible because of the level of tight operations and tight risk assessment and preserving our pupils in class or year group bubbles. So those restrictions are still in place. So we're not completely in the position that we can recover from COVID yet. The operational matters were highlighted to parents in a letter from myself yesterday. So parents across Swansea will have received a letter via their schools outlining the facts that I've just covered off there. We have heard this week an announcement from the education regulator from Estyn stating that school inspections are now suspended during the autumn term. So that feeds and provides hope really to schools in terms of not having to consider an inspection looming during the autumn term. So we foresee that Estyn will recommence their pilot inspections after Easter in 2022. We do recognise that our strategic contribution to achieving better together, the Council's recovery plan, there are discernible work streams for education to consider, and this committee has obviously seen the emerging issues that we're grappling with, but wellbeing is very high on the agenda. And you will have seen really the renew and reform agenda from Welsh Government, and our plans for recovery in education here in Swansea are very much aligned to the national expectations for education recovery. We will see the potential for additional staffing in some of our schools in September. We already saw that in the autumn term when we had the accelerated learning programme, which saw a number of staff appearing as extra additional staff in Swansea schools. And I think that engendered about 40 additional staff, 40 staff in Swansea in the autumn. So moving forward to this autumn, there is a £6 million Pan Wales proposal to ensure that initial teacher education students going into the education profession can continue with their training, and this will be funded by Welsh Government, so teachers can complete their training and provide extra resource really to schools, and also newly qualified teachers who haven't been able to fulfil the number of days required in terms of their first year of teaching. They will also be funded by Welsh Government, and that will enable schools, should they choose to adopt this approach, to actually receive more human resource, which would be funded by Welsh Government. So it is really up to schools really to make a case that they would like to engage with this system and have some additional staffing, which can only help really, knowing that we have very much a beleaguered workforce in schools at the moment. We know that part of the recovery as well is listening to the voice of children and young people in Swansea, and Councillor Smith and myself will start a pilot approach next week where we will start to engage with our secondary school pupils to understand what some of the recovery themes are for them, and we will start a pilot virtual visit to Ysgol Gymraeg, Ysgol Gyfun Bryn Tawe next week. So that's going to help us really assess the voice of learners in all of this. And I think that's probably it in terms of recovery from me. So I'll turn to Councillor Smith, just in case you've got something you need to add there.
Yes, no, I mean, I think Helen's covered what I was going to say. I mean, obviously, I wanted to pay tribute to all our schools and all the staff we have and the learners for the way they've coped with the unprecedented situation we've had over the last year, 18 months. There's no blueprint for this, and schools have had to work their own solutions with our support. in the dark, as a learning experience for us all, and it's a tribute to them that they've succeeded the way they have. What we will do as a local authority is to support those schools, support the front line, and I think as Helen said, the well-being of our children and young people has to be crucial in this. These are very difficult times, as I said, and challenging times for our schools. They were already challenging when you look at the educational reform agenda that was being pursued before COVID. And to see this going on as well is hugely challenging, and let's not underestimate that. So I think our schools need to prioritise. They are the ones best placed to know what their learners needs, and our role will be to support and facilitate that work as far as we can.
Great, thank you, Robert. Any questions to either Helen or Robert? No hands up. Gosh, that's very good. I'd also like to thank, as we have done in the past throughout the pandemic, to thank our, the people in the education department and the people in the front line and the chalk base in the schools, our teachers, the teaching assistants, the heads, and the great work that they're doing. And as Robert, you rightly said, they've been on a huge learning curve because nobody expected this. None of us knew about it. It was new, and it was a question of getting out there and getting on with the job. And I think they did us proud. We've now getting on with the recovery, which is challenging. So I'd just like to say big thank you to everyone for the work they do. And great, thank you very much. And the next item on the agenda, we're going through very quickly. I thought we'd be a few hours, but in fact, the next item is the draft work program for the next year. And our next meeting is on the 15th of July. Michelle, would you like to come in on any of this? I think she's around here somewhere.
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just pretty much as it is. I don't know if you wanted to add in. You were talking about adding in an extra item around the curriculum, Lyndon, if I recall, when we had a chat last. Maybe a 6 monthly. So in October, you wanted just an update there, wasn't it?
Yeah, this is obviously a draft, and I was going to suggest that the new curriculum is vitally important and how it's progressing. And I was going to suggest that on the 21st of October, we also add in an update on the new curriculum, so that we all aware where we are with that. Because, as I say, it is something that's really important. And the only other point I'd raise, on the 30th of September, we got how are we improving schools in Swansea, and I'd like to suggest a few things to put into that sort of slot, in readiness for the city deal. Also, how we are getting on with telling other schools about best practice. Because all of us have visited schools and we've seen things that are doing really well, and we want other schools to sort of pick up on that and maybe look at best practice, and also how we are doing with support for children on free school meals as 3 sort of additional ones into as part of how are we improving schools in Swansea.
Sorry, what was the first one?
It was in readiness for the city deal. Because obviously it's important that our children have got the right skills, so that we can all, that they can enjoy the best jobs, have the opportunity of getting those jobs. And I think we need to get the right skills. The second one is best practice, because as I say, we've all visited schools across Swansea, and some of the things they're doing is absolutely tremendous, and we just want to make sure that we can get that out to other schools so that they can enjoy that as well, and everybody will have something good to say. in their schools, and I think we need to get that best practice out there. And the other thing is the support for children on free school meals, because I think that is an area that we've looked at a number of times, and our children that we need to be giving that special attention to. Are there any other thoughts on the work programme?
Sorry, Lyndon, but did you want to add something around the issue that you looked at on the first item on the agenda, was the harassment? Did you want to schedule that in or see when?
Shall we leave that? Obviously, we need to go obviously back. We just mentioned it today. In you know, obviously it was important that it was brought up because it has been in the news, and I think. But I do think we need to be looking at it. It's right that the committee do and see what our responses are. And I think, but shall we leave that fluid to see when Councillor Smith comes back to us and Helen Morgan-Rees, so that we can then address that at the appropriate time. But I'd like to think that we can slot that in, you know, at that time then. And any comments, anyone? Oh, sorry, Al, you've got your hand up. I wasn't looking at my screen properly here.
No problem, Chair. Thank you very much. Yeah, I just wondered whether or not we wanted to look at education other than at school again, given the increase there's been in this area because of COVID, and to look at what those figures look like, what the support around those pupils looks like, and how much of an issue it is, what that's looking like on the ground. So.
Well, shall we try and put that in on the 21st of October as well?
I see you've recently had the figure, didn't you? Recently had an update on that, was in May.
I'm just wondering whether or not that's something, maybe we don't need to have it quite so soon, but just so that we're keeping an eye on it through this year coming.
Yeah, sure. We'll certainly do that. We can look at the 21st of October, but see how the agenda goes. But I think it is another area that is actually vitally important. And Mike Day, sorry, yeah. Mike's got his hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Lyndon. Just picking up your point about ensuring that school pupils are properly prepared for the future. It links in quite obviously with the Regional Learning Skills Partnership. So I would guess that Robert and Helen would be inviting somebody along from that, and it might be useful for us to have you know, just a little bit of a brief update in terms of how things are going on that particular partnership.
Sure. That we can certainly. I'm going to a scrutiny meeting for Eru on in a few weeks actually, and of course the footprint is changing, so that will obviously be important. I'll get. Helen has put her hand up, and I think she may want to come back. Could I ask Miles next, though? Miles Langston.
Yeah, it was just to agree with Mike's point. I think having an update on that body would be really helpful. Obviously, we're getting towards the sort of business end of things on the city deal, so we need to know how that's sort of playing out in terms of educating schools on the types of skills and jobs that are going to be, or skills that are going to be needed and jobs that are going to be available. So a report back on that and what is happening in practice would be really helpful.
Great, thanks, Miles. Helen.
Yeah, just to clarify a point on the Regional Learning and Skills Partnership, it's not the same as Eru. And I think we need to be very clear that the Regional Learning and Skills Partnership is the main driver in the submission of the business case for the Skills and Talent Initiative for the City Deal. So their presence would be far more suitable than new partnership colleagues for education improvement.
Point taken, Helen. Good point. Thank you. Any other questions? Anything anybody would like to comment on the draft program before it becomes the program? Obviously, it's a moving feast and it can be moved, but as there are no further comments, could I thank you all for attending, and note our next meeting is on the 15th of July. Thank you very much indeed.
Well chaired. Thank you, Lyndon.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you very much. Thank you. Good evening.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.